I used to think loyalty was just a fairy tale, until I saw 400 people quit their jobs just to wait for one person to come back. I live in a small town not far from Boston, where Market Basket isn't just a grocery store. It's a place where people remember each other by name. I got to the supermarket at 5:43 a.m. The windshield's still slick with lingering fog. The back door to the stockroom wasn't open yet, but I saw the yellow light glowing inside. I don't usually come in this early, but today I needed the extra hours. Rent was 2 weeks late, and little Gracie's piano lessons were due. I parked next to Tony's old pickup, the Italian guy who's been driving the forklift here for almost 20 years. He's always the first one in, never lets anyone see him tired. I stepped out of the car, shoulders heavy like every Monday morning, but my mind was focused on one thing: finishing early so I could stop by church and light a candle for Mom. The stockroom smelled like damp cardboard and frozen bread. Somewhere in the corner, the forklift let out a soft growl. I nodded to Tony as he tightened straps around a stack of milk crates, his eyes as quiet as ever. No one talks at this hour. Maybe it's the cold. Maybe we've all just adapted to the silent rhythm of survival. I walked down the left aisle, flipped open the inventory log, and started checking the new shipment of orange juice. My hand scanned the list while my mind drifted to the unpaid credit card balance waiting at home. At 6:07, Paul, the guy who always wears headphones, walked in and said quietly, "They fired him." I looked up. "Who?" I asked, my voice half asleep. "Arthur. They kicked him out. Last night." I thought he was messing with me, but Paul never jokes before coffee. Tony froze, looked over, his face tightening like it had been flash frozen. No one said another word. We didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly which Arthur he meant. Arthur T. Demoulas, CEO of Market Basket. I exhaled, my chest sinking like I'd just taken a punch. I had never even met him, but I knew he paid tuition for a cashier's daughter. I knew he remembered the names of every security guard at every store. People don't do that for applause. They do it because they mean it. And when someone who means it gets pushed out, this place won't be the same again. I stood in the stockroom, my hand still resting on a box of unopened orange juice. Paul had already walked toward the parking lot, and Tony stood frozen like a statue. A minute later, he quietly turned away without saying a word, and then I heard the milk crate hit the ground. It didn't break, but the sound cracked through the silence like a slammed door. I didn't know why my eyes started to sting. I had never been the type to grow attached to any company, but here at Market Basket, no one forced us to believe in anyone, and yet we still chose to believe in him. At 7:30, the store lights started flickering on. I walked past the entrance and saw Linda, the head cashier, standing stiff like someone had just stabbed her in the gut. They said they're appointing someone new from the board, she said as I passed. Probably a bunch of guys who know spreadsheets, not people. I didn't know what to say. All I knew was, if Linda looked shaken, this was serious. By noon, I witnessed the strangest thing. Nobody was joking around. No music at the seafood counter. Even the delivery kids weren't tossing paper balls at each other. The whole store felt eerily still, like someone had died, and the funeral hadn't happened yet. A group of employees started drafting a letter, asking the board to bring Arthur back. Someone muttered, "Letters won't do anything." But then a girl from the bakery, who had never once spoken to me, stood up and said, "Then at least we won't be silent." That evening, I got home late. I stopped by the gas station near my place, stood in front of the pump, watching the neon lights reflect off my car like a scene from some hazy movie. I didn't know if the store would ever be the same again, but I knew this. I would never work just for a paycheck again. I'd put my heart on the line, like he once did, and accept if it gets shattered, because if I didn't, I'd always just be a stock boy, and him. Even after being pushed out the door, he'd still be the man an entire store was waiting for. I didn't clock in that Friday. It wasn't some heroic act. It was a decision of man afraid. that if he didn't stand up now, one day his daughter would look at him and feel ashamed. I drove to the parking lot like it was any other morning, but instead of walking into the stockroom, I stood outside with the others, people who had quit without pay, without protection, without promises. I saw Tony. I saw Paul. I saw Linda. I even saw the delivery kid still wearing his ink-stained shirt. We didn't chant. We didn't have bullhorns. We just had our presence and the faint, foolish hope that someone up there was paying attention. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mary. Before I could answer, it stopped and a text lit up the screen. Gracie's scholarship application got rejected. We owe $1,200 by next week. I read it 3 times. It felt like someone grabbed the back of my neck and slammed my face into the concrete. I didn't have $1,200. Most of our savings went into last month's gas bill. And here I was, standing outside a grocery store, making nothing, risking everything, just to defend the name of a man I'd never even shaken hands with. Mary called again. I picked up. Her voice was tighter than usual. Where are you? I told her the truth. I'm out front, with the others. Silence. Then she said something I never thought I'd hear from my wife. Who are you protecting? Is anyone out there going to pay our kids' tuition? I wanted to argue, but there was nothing to say that would have made me proud of myself in that moment. I hung up, shoved the phone into my pocket, my throat dry, my chest feeling like it had been hollowed out, one scoop at a time. I didn't know what I believed in anymore. Arthur wasn't here. No one knew if he'd ever come back. And even if he did, who's to say he'd remember my name, or just the names of those who begged in letters? But I knew this. I couldn't walk through those doors, because if I did, I'd always be the man who stepped over his own dignity to punch a clock. I got my termination notice on Monday morning, tucked inside an envelope, so thin you could see the type through it. The person who handed it to me wasn't my boss. Wasn't HR, just an intern. I was just asked to pass it along, he mumbled before backing away like he'd touched fire. I didn't open it right away. I stood there in the walk-in cooler, staring at it like it was something that didn't belong to me until my hand started to tremble. That's when I knew it was mine, entirely. I opened it. 3 lines. They didn't even spell my name right. No thank you. No final paycheck date. Just a neat way of saying, we don't need you anymore, and frankly, we don't care what happens to you once you're out that door. I didn't slam a fist on the table. Didn't scream. I walked straight to the parking lot, drove home in silence, the radio still playing but nothing landing. When I pulled into the driveway, Mary was already standing at the door, holding a stack of scholarship forms, red, yellow, blue, like a color palette I no longer had the means to paint with. You really lost your job? She asked. No greeting. No hug. I nodded. I could sue, I said. But the moment the words left my mouth, they sounded ridiculous. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have a contract worth defending. All I had was faith, and now it felt like a rotted door, ripped off its hinges by the wind. Mary slammed the forms onto the table. Her voice caught in her throat, but her eyes stayed dry. Gracie won't make it to summer music classes. I've already begged them 3 times to hold off on tuition. What now? I looked around the house. The old fridge, the chipped wooden table, the kitchen light flickering like someone on the edge of tears. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there like a thief caught in the act. Not for stealing, but for trusting the wrong thing. All this for your Arthur? She snapped, no longer holding back. Has he even asked how you're doing? Has he sent one thank you text? You stood out there defending his honor, and now our daughter's getting shut out of her music class. I turned away, not because I was ashamed, but because I was scared she'd see the complete hollowness in my face. I had nothing left to cling to. No job, no certainty, not even a conviction that I'd done the right thing. That night, I sat out back on the porch, holding the termination letter like it was a guilty verdict. No one sat beside me. There were no words left that could make sense of any of it. And in that stillness, I found myself asking a question I wasn't ready for. If Arthur really cared, why has he been so damn silent? 3 days after I got fired, Paul called. Weird. He never calls anyone unless something's broken in the back room. His voice was soft at first, but then it turned cold, like steel chilled in ice. 3 days after I got fired, Paul called. Weird. He never calls anyone unless something's broken in the back room. His voice was soft at first, but then it turned cold, like steel chilled in ice. I froze. Why are you asking? Because someone told me he doesn't want to come back. That sentence knocked the breath out of me, not because of the rumor itself, but because of Paul's voice. It didn't sound like gossip. It sounded like a man who had seen something and couldn't unsee it. His people called the board last week, Paul continued. Instead of negotiating his return, they asked, if the company gives in, who guarantees the profits will bounce back in 3 months? He paused. No one answered, not even Arthur. I wanted to scream. That's manipulation. That's just spin. Lies meant to divide us. But I didn't, because deep inside, another voice, one that wasn't Paul's, began to whisper, if he really cared, why hasn't he stood in front of us, even once? I hung up, stood up, started pacing the living room like a man with nowhere to go. On the table sat a drawing Gracie had left behind, a green sheet of paper showing a dad waving at someone, scrawled with the words, my dad is the bravest man. I laughed, a crooked, bitter laugh, half cracked, half hollow. Then I crumpled the page and tossed it into the trash. Not because I hated my daughter, but because I wasn't sure if the man in that drawing still existed. That night, I went online for the first time in days. Arthur Demoulas was everywhere. The market basket crisis. A battle between two factions. Employees' unwavering faith in their former CEO. But in all those headlines, not a single quote from the man himself. No statement. No thank you. No promise to return. I shut the laptop, pushed the chair into the middle of the room, sat down like a man awaiting judgment, and for the first time in my life, I asked a question that hurt the most. Am I gambling my family on a man who never once gambled on me? I went back to the old supermarket on a Saturday morning, not to work, not to ask for anything back. I went to return my ID badge, my uniform, and every piece of myself that had once been stitched into that place. It felt like scattering someone's ashes, light in the hand, but heavy in the chest. The store was lit. People came and went like any other day. Some familiar faces remained, but everyone's eyes were glazed, cold, like mirrors left out in the snow. No one asked where I'd been. I didn't say hello. I just placed my badge and shirt quietly on the customer service counter, then turned to leave. As I reached the door, Linda called out. She was still there, like a monument cracked down the middle, but somehow still standing. She jogged over and handed me an envelope. Not from Arthur, she said. This is from the strike organizers. They pooled funds to the ones who lost their jobs. I took it, didn't open it, not out of pride, but because I wasn't sure I had the heart to touch anything that came from a collective anymore. Has he said anything? I asked. My voice was hollow. Linda shook her head. Not a word, not a single call. He's not the same man anymore. I nodded. I wasn't surprised, but hearing her say it still felt like someone reached into my chest and twisted. I turned away. Didn't want her to see me like this. Drained, wrecked. Not even a shadow of the man who once said, justice is worth waiting for. I drove to an empty lot near my house, killed the engine, opened the car door, and sat on the hood like I used to back in high school. The wind was light, but it didn't feel kind. I opened the envelope. Inside, $320, and a small scrap of paper with the words, "We remember you." I folded it, gently, like a eulogy. That afternoon, I came home and sat beside Mary while she folded laundry. I didn't apologize, didn't make promises. I just said, I'm not waiting for him anymore. She looked at me, said nothing, but she nodded like someone who had just gotten news that a loved one had died and could finally start grieving. That night, I rewrote my resume. For the first time in years, I checked the box, willing to accept any position, even outside my field. Not because I'd given up, but because I finally understood. Faith is the most beautiful thing when placed in the right hands, and the cruelest when it's not. I started working at the gas station outside town in the third week. Simple job. Oil changes, windshield wipes, sometimes just standing still listening to the software that pumped through the night. No one knew I used to work at Market Basket. No one asked why I was here, and I didn't offer anything. I wore a faded blue uniform. The name tag had my last name wrong, but I didn't bother fixing it. They called me Jay instead of James. That was fine, maybe even fitting, starting over without needing to explain a damn thing to anyone. Gracie still goes to music class. Mary found a church fund that helps families. I don't know what she said to get them to say yes. All I know is, on Sunday morning while I was washing a car out front, a woman handed me an envelope. "For the girl with talent," she said, "and for the father who didn't give up." I took it, nodded, didn't say a word. I was afraid if I did, the lump in my throat would rise and spill over. I don't mention Arthur anymore. Don't check for updates. Don't read new articles. Don't ask if anyone remembers him. Maybe he was never the man I thought he was. Maybe he was, and then changed. But either way, I had built part of my identity in his shadow. And when he stayed silent, it felt like I had demolished my own house and was standing in the rubble asking, who gave me the hammer? But there are nights, cold ones, when the wind glides past a gas station like it's brushing against a tire. And I wonder, maybe Arthur was just like me, choosing silence not out of indifference, but exhaustion. Maybe he gave up everything before we ever knew, or maybe he didn't. Either way, he's no longer the answer. I no longer believe in figureheads. I believe in what I can do for Gracie, for Mary, and for myself. Quietly, one wiped windshield at a time, one crumpled tip at a time. It's the only thing that hasn't betrayed me. One evening in mid-October, as I was closing up the gas station, Tony pulled up in his old pickup. I didn't recognize him at first. His face was more hollow, hair whiter around the ears, but his eyes were the same. Deep, steady, the kind that don't ask questions because they already understand. He cut the engine, stepped out, didn't say a word. We looked at each other. Then he pulled out 2 beers, set one down on an old oil drum next to the wooden bench. "I just quit," he said. "Had nothing better to do, so I came to see if you were still breathing." I sat down beside him, cracked open the can, took a sip, salty from the wind, cold from October, and filled with a feeling I couldn't name. We didn't talk about the supermarket, didn't mention the days under picket signs, didn't ask who was right, who was wrong. We just sat there like 2 men who'd weathered the same storm, and now only needed to know the other had made it out alive. After a while, Tony reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an old photo. It was a morning crew from Market Basket. Me, Linda, Paul, even the delivery kid. Everyone was smiling. I noticed my hand was resting on Paul's shoulder, something I'd never realized when a photo was taken. "I keep this," Tony said, "to remind myself I once believed in something, in someone." I looked at the picture, felt a sharp pull in my chest. Not regret, but something more honest. For the first time, I understood what mattered wasn't whether Arthur ever came back. What mattered was that I had once stood for something I believed in, and that, though erased from peril, couldn't be erased from the memory of people like me, People who stood in the cold not for reward, but because they couldn't bring themselves to kneel. I tried handing the photo back. Tony wouldn't take it. "Keep it," he said. "Maybe someday Gracie will ask you, 'What did you believe in the most, Dad?'" I folded the picture. Didn't cry. Didn't smile. Just sat there beside the only person who still remembered. This isn't a story about a hero. It's a story about an ordinary man and the price we sometimes pay when we believe in something all the way through. Sometimes, standing on the right side doesn't mean you win, doesn't mean you get praised. Sometimes it means losing your job, losing people you love, losing the image of yourself you thought you were chasing. But if you don't stand at all, you lose the one thing that matters most, yourself. In a world where silence is safer than loyalty, having the courage to believe and to take responsibility for that belief is already something extraordinary. Not every belief is right. Not every person we defend is worthy. But if you've ever stood for something, even if it all came crashing down, then you still have this: the right to look your child in the eye and say, "I didn't turn my back." Have you ever lost something because you chose to hold on to your belief? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there might need to know they're not the only one. If this story touched something deep within you, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next healing stories. Every share, every comment you leave is a powerful reminder for us to keep telling real stories about people, about wounds, and about how we keep moving forward, even when no one's left standing behind us. Thank you for staying until the end. We still have each other, in the small acts of kindness that still matter.